guys, today we have Mari Vega, and she is the founder of Mikkoh. She is a plant-based chef and also a prominent food activist. Welcome to the Misappointment.
Hey Daisy, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this conversation.
Yes.
So Mikkoh is, you serve modern Mexican cuisine, and you also partner with a lot of local farmers and community, vendors. But tell me more a little bit about Mikkoh and its origins.
Yeah, so Mikkoh is the Aztec goddess of corn. She's also the goddess of sustainability. That really ties into my family's heritage, where corn farmers from Guanajuato, specifically Cútaro, Las Pilas, small, tiny villages, and both of my grandparents in our family, we've been growing corn for over 100 years. We certainly fought hard for our land, and I think that it's only appropriate to keep fighting hard for what they worked for.
So what I really love about Mikkoh is you also host these dinner series at the Spindle and La Fruta, where it's not just about providing people these nutritious foods, but it's also about increasing food education and local, community awareness.
Yeah, to me, food is so layered, and I think that providing it through a couple of platforms really allows to educate people. At the Spindle, we're there 2 weeks out of the month, and those are just very casual plates. All of the food we obviously still source responsibly, but we don't really always have the time to talk about it at the Spindle. At least with the 5 courses at La Fruta, it sort of involves everybody's trust, and I have the time to go through as I present each course and let them know exactly where each item came from. And if, for instance, I have a course that's pozole, I get to talk about what that pozole means to me. And it's also just like a way to reach out to a whole range of people. Usually when they come to the 5 courses, we get anywhere from 20 to 30 random people, walks of life, that are just all ears, and they just were interested to feel this experience. But with the 5 tasting, it's just wonderful. It's a way to touch people.
Yeah, I like that. You are also a big supporter of community-supported agriculture, aka CSA. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, CSA, it can mean a lot of things. But to me, what it really means is, yes, you're supporting your community agriculture, but you're also creating these relationships with these growers as you're using that product, at least for me, for my livelihood. So establishing these relationships means I can go and see what is happening before it hits the market. I can also see how they're working with their land. I can also see, how hard these people are working to create this nutrition for us. So that plays into each dish that I create. I really try to make sure that their work is represented as best as possible.
Yeah. And that goes back to, knowing where your food comes from, right? Getting to know your farmers. And it's not just, again, about really having the food products on your plate. It's also creating these relationships with the farmers in your community.
Yes, it's creating a way to properly pay people for what you're receiving in order to live this life. We all need food, but we all forget who is providing this food. Working with CSA is a direct way to impact people. It's a direct way to impact your community. You can truly put a face to where your money is going, and you know that they're getting paid because you see the price difference. The only time there's a markdown is maybe the vegetable is bruised. But you're actually paying for someone's life.
Yeah, and with CSA too, I think they really prioritize planet over profit. They're very aware of what their farming techniques are doing to the ecology, to the earth.
Right. I mean, it's just sort of creating the awareness to understand that biodiversity is essential to every day, and yes, eating squash every day could be boring, but also you need to have mycelium festering in the ground, the mushrooms doing their work to repair soils, to sort of transmit different signals. And messages to other plants, whatever it may be. I think that biodiversity within the community only really speaks towards biodiversity as people.
Yeah, you mentioned biodiversity, which I think this is an important time to mention also how our body should be treated as an ecosystem. Just like with farming, it should also take in consideration not just about the plant that you're growing, but also the living organisms around it.
Yeah, I mean, with biodiversity, we get these wonderful things called adaptogens and immunomodulators that I think as many of us are starting to explore self-care, we don't take those little notes into consideration that are so important, the stress factors. If you have biodiverse farming, typically you'll have an assortment of herbs and vegetables that already have to build resiliency in their current growing conditions. Those properties, once you harvest that vegetable, they go directly into your body. Yeah. That nutrients carries on into your current situation.
And for those who don't know, adaptogen is a term used for basically any agent that allows your body to adapt to a changing environment. So an example, an adaptogen would be like ashwagandha or the stuff that you use.
Yeah, holy basil.
Holy basil, passion flower. What was the other one? Hibiscus? Would you say that would be also an adaptogen?
Maybe, but I think definitely like reishi mushrooms are as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Mugwort, and mugwort grows all over Southwest Atlanta. There's mimosa too. The mimosa flowers, we see them all over the South.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we don't even recognize that when I have vinegars or things on the dish. A lot of this stuff goes unspoken, even in the spindle dishes. Yeah. Sometimes it'll be infused like a herb, like a grain will be infused with holy basil. Mm-hmm. Sometimes folks say, "I feel so good after I eat your food," and I'm like, "Well, that's really nice." But sometimes I'm like, "I think that was the tulsi or the turmeric." So yes.
What I really like about your culinary practice, and this goes along with CSA, is reducing food waste.
Yeah, so even like I mentioned with the holy basil vinegar, that might have come around simply because the farmer was like, "Hey, we have 2 rows of holy basil right now. What are we gonna do with this?" And I'm like, "I don't know, I'll take 2 pounds. I'm not sure I'm gonna be able to garnish with everything all, but I know that I can set some aside, create a little shrub vinegar mixture out of it, have it later down the road, maybe say December when I'm feeling like poop and I crack it open, I get all the medicine out of that." It's a practice that I do also with veg stocks, leftover scrap materials. I use up the nice parts and then I just still keep that vegetable and create a nice stock that, maybe not all the eaters that consume my food realize, but you're probably building a very nice defense system each bite.
I like that, yeah.
And that's also something that is intimidating as just an everyday person cooking for themselves, but it's also something that can be a ritual that you can create of just setting aside some scraps, creating a little veg stock, and that's a way to start really practicing a green lifestyle. It's sort of figuring out ways to make it easy for people.
Yeah. I mean, that goes back to self-care, which is the idea of you want to start with easy, simple steps. You can't, just all of a sudden make this dramatic change. It has to be a gradual, healthy habit, building. So same thing with eating. I want to talk about mindful eating and really listening to your body, listening to your hunger, and being more of a conscious consumer.
Yeah, I think it's important for folks to understand that you don't need to follow certain trends. I think that something as simple, once again, as just working with what is available and your grower, your local grower can actually help build your defense, but also it'll get your body adapted to where it, once again, receives as much nutrients as it actually really needs. And so it doesn't crave as many things, and it cuts back on those cravings, because usually those come from processed goods anyway, and you're just sort of reversing your gut into understanding these natural organics that are happening and breaking down. It doesn't have to work as hard. It understands what's going in. And that is like so overlooked. And it's such a simple little thing that you could practice every day. And just understanding that you don't have to be on a diet, that it could just be nutrient dense.
What I also really love about Chikomekwa is that you really touch on your roots, being a Mexican American, and most people who are, or there's a tendency for people to try out these like mainstream diets and they forget to identify with where, you know, they really came from and like what their ancestor has been eating for years and years. But with you, you always identify back to that, which I think is honorable.
Yes, you're right. I mean, I think like our DNA has been built in for certain understanding of what to break down. And as immigrants, we're in a whole new like environment where we're having to understand what these diets are. So with our food is unique because we are not, I never lived in Mexico, but I visited many a times throughout my entire life. And I have been living in Atlanta for 10 years, cooking in Atlanta for 10 years here in the South. I grew up in North Georgia. So what has worked best for me is to identify as authentically within all of those factors to create the food that actually makes sense. And that also is important to start to recognize that it's okay to do that, because then we're being mindful and conscious of our ingredients, and we're being sustainable because we recognize that a tomatillo doesn't always grow in Georgia, but mustard greens do, and they are tardy and they do have a spice, and you can make a salsa out of it, and you could put it in pozole verde. And it's not necessarily something that you would always see in Mexican cuisine. But those are the ways that we're encouraging the younger generations and the current generations to sort of embrace where you are, use the ingredients that you grew up here knowing, and then being sustainable about it and conscious in that way.
I love that. So one of the things that we really try to do with the Missed Appointment is we encourage people to redefine what self-care means to them. And part of that is, you know, really identifying with who you really are as a whole, completely, even like your past and your heritage. And again, I'm just restating that, like with Chikomekwa, you really do that so honestly and just so authentically.
Yes, I think that what for me is important is identifying things in our culture that have caused barriers. And for my cuisine, we're taking all of those barriers and all those factors, barriers by like health problems and why we're here as immigrants and what it means to be here and what it means to work with our community. And so something that we're working towards that is part of my life's work is creating a network of corn farmers that are growing indigenous strands of Georgian corn. We're going to be using that to nixtamalized to create masa for tortillas and tamales and whatnot. But the important fact from this is that we're creating masa that has nutrition, that supports people here in Georgia, that'll be offsetted so that underserved communities, particularly Latino communities, can actually eat a staple, you know, good in the Mexican cuisine that is going to be good for them, that is not going to cause them to have diabetes, that is not going to cause them to feel like shit after they eat it. I think that that is something that ties back into what self-care means, which is rooting back with the nutrition that you feed into your body, but connecting the relationship of, all right, here's this vegetable. Where did it come from? Who did this? You know, because I'm about to do some work to it, and it's all work. Your body's going to break it down. It's going to go through work, and then you're going to shit it out. So connecting the work is part of self-care.
That's good. Where do you see Chikomekwa in the future?
In the future, we would have already set up our collective of growers where we would be producing our masa already and then going back to Mexico to restore the land that my grandparents fought so hard for from the hacendados, and restoring it. We're monoculture right now in the villages. Nobody farms the mesa anymore. So I want to create a community center there on top of it, because it's like the hardest piece of land to farm. So I want to show that it's the hardest piece of land, and there are resources that we can use, and that we need to create biodiversity again, and we need to restore at least as much of our, ancestral heritage as we can. I would really love to see our villages thriving again off of each other's products.
I like that, yeah. Well, thank you, Mari, for being with us here today and telling us a little bit about Chicomequot and your heritage. If you guys want to check out her food, you can check it out at...
Yes, you can come by the Spindle 2 weeks out of the month. Our 5-course dinner series is La Casita at La Fruta, and we're there once a month.
Yeah. We'll link everything down below, and thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
My missed appointment is not seeing my family enough and not spending time with them.